Hey all, welcome to another Getting Smart Town Hall. I am Mason Pasha with Getting Smart. Thrilled that you all are here today. Today we're talking about out of school time and a book that came out, I believe, last summer or fall called Built for More. We're joined by some of the folks that played a major role in that book and were highlighted in that book. So we're going to get to hear some great stories as well as highlight the collective intelligence of the group. If you haven't been to a town hall before, we always start an event with a poem. It's something we've been doing for quite some time now. And I'm really excited that today we are joined by Rambo, a poet who I believe was a part of the Big Thought program previously, which is super exciting. So, Rambo, thanks for being here. Go ahead and give us a poem to start us off today. And then, as folks are listening, feel free to drop things in the chat that resonate with you. And at the end, we may have a minute or two for reflection as well. So, Rambo, take it away. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yep.
Most of these spoken moments can easily be subscribed to me or you. I think we would all oblige to the open enrollment to a time when we could be mentally and emotionally defined by either of the two. Simplistic words, oblivious and aloof. I speak of the potent temporal pocket that occurs for us all, is commonly described as youth. I'm talking intermittent ambitions, typically with different descriptions of talent and tools that have been earned or gifted, in addition with some arithmetic applied to the statistics. One can imply that unity is multiplied even in the presence of division. The abstract is we need to magnify the similarities, not the difference. Those with the ears to hear and the eyes to see, this may be evident. This is a small world spinning on its axis faster than how propellers spin. Generationally speaking, time is relevant. We need to relish this. Dog, we need organizations with big thoughts to assist in the people's development. Imagine being prepared for potential economic situations. For the next move to be the best move, first step is education. Improving skills to pay for more than just the bills is a globally desired destination. Teaching knowledge that evolves into wisdom, comprehension in the networks and the systems around us and within us. With this at hand, career advancement would take place before the hair starts thinning. This is the way to proceed. Helping future generations help themselves is what any long-standing industry needs. This will provide a structure that would essentially shatter all illusions. Then we could focus on collaboration and partnership, equity and inclusion. But who knows? People are going to do what they do. But I'm sure most of these spoken moments can easily be subscribed to me or you. I think we would all oblige to the open enrollment to a time where we could no longer be mentally and emotionally defined by either of the two. Simplistic words, really, but I believe we can't afford to be oblivious or aloof. Thank you.
Fire. I had to come off from mute. Sorry. Fire.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, Byron. Glad you enjoyed it.
That was awesome, Rambo. Thank you for sharing that.
Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
There's a
For the opportunity.
little waterfall in the chat if you weren't able to see that while you were going.
It's great. I'm really glad you guys liked it. I definitely put some time and some research into it. Tried to give a little big thought shout out in there as well. I don't know if you guys seen that.
Nailed it.
For sure, for sure. Glad you guys liked it. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, of course. If you're able to stick around, Rambo, we'd love to pull you into the conversation, I'm sure, as we go when we're talking about Big Thought. But if you got to jump, that's totally all right. Just
definitely stick around.
Cool. You give Josh a full tank at 6 a.m. Hawaii time. Let's go. That's all you can ask for on these things. So that's fantastic. And everybody, we will share the words and a recording of the performance as well from Rambo. So for those who want to go back and listen more closely, because there's a lot of gold there. So perfect.
Appreciate it.
Glad
you guys liked it.
Yeah, thank you, Rambo. I'm gonna move your spotlight now and share my screen again. All right, Tom, I'm gonna bring you in here. Who are we talking to today, and what are we covering?
Just a couple words of thanks to Rambo for a provocative opening. Rambo, I'm processing open enrollment that came up a couple times. That's a loaded thought. So you got to say more about that. What's open enrollment? It's both the beautiful thing and it's tricky. Say a couple more sentences about what's behind that.
Okay, so my idea behind it is, well, I feel like open enrollment definitely goes into more a lot of, like across the board. Like I feel like that's one of the first things that one would think about when they hear those words put together. But it's also used in a way that would indicate that it's voluntary, but as well as like a rite of passage, because I'm speaking about youth in general and the fact that we can all, regardless of the age that we are now, we can all think back to a time in which we were youth. So I feel like in that pocket of age, like it's our open enrollment into a time period that we can all more or less identify with, as well as it going in line with, with school and being educated, whether it be, middle school, elementary school, college, whatever, so have you.
Yeah. Thank you, Rambo. Thanks, Josh, for that thought. I saw Amy Anderson on here from Reschool, Colorado. It made me think about unbundled learning, about kind of extended opportunity, particularly our subject for today, out of school learning. But the idea of enrollment, Rambo, to me points to learner agency. And when I think about the future of work, not just the future of work, but the future of human expression, of citizenship, the future of commerce and contribution, it really comes down to agency and young people that have a sense of purpose and direction, and the self-possession, right, to understand their gifts and strengths and the opportunities around them so that they can enroll in expression, in citizenship, in commerce. So this idea of open enrollment, it requires more of us as agents and actors. And second point, we're entering this new phase of not just being an individual contributor, but contributing a team. And sometimes that team is carbon humans and silicon agents, right? And so we're enrolling into experiences that are often amplified and with agents and co-intelligence at our side. Another reason to think about it, that idea of enrolling in the work, enrolling in expression, enrolling in citizenship. So anyway, we really appreciate you being here and the thought that you've given us. Today is such a gift, because I really spent the last few months thinking hard about the link between the future of work and deeper learning, which I think is a particularly productive response to what's happening in the world. But I've been really focused on what happens in school, and thinking a lot about the work of Michael Fullen, about the leadership of High Tech High and the deeper learning community that gathered last week in San Diego. And this beautiful book and conversation today takes us a step further and says, actually, where we can do deeper learning, the meaningful, agentic, experiential, super relevant work, is where we can do it the fastest, maybe the best, is in the out of school space. And this new book, Built for More, is really the first and best case for out of school time being a critically important response to equip young people to, as Rambo said, to enroll in the opportunity space. So we're joined by some great friends of Getting Smart. Byron Sanders, one of our board members, former CEO at Big Thought in Dallas, where this work got started. Bobby McDonald, a partner of Big Thought, an ecosystem sponsor at Education Reimagined, and also Christopher Street at the All-Star Project, also like Byron in Dallas, but like Bobby, lighting up out-of-school ecosystems around the country. Welcome to the three of you. Congrats on this great new book, Built for More. There's a picture of it there on your screen. Byron, say a little bit more about how you're thinking about the future of work and this interesting connection with the out-of-school space.
One, just grateful to you guys for platforming this conversation. Oftentimes, we OST people got a little chip on our shoulder. We're, sometimes not as critically thought of in the education journey. But man, if you think about 24 hours in a day, How many of them are in the school building? Everything else is literally out of school time. So that's actually one of the things, just from a utilitarian standpoint, it probably would be good for us to really target this strategy to not only be about safe places for kids outside of school, to not just be about an additional place to go get a meal, not just be about childcare. All of those things are critically important. But man, to your point, it's an unused and untapped resource if we don't really lean in on this capacity. And so it really, our thesis comes from the world around us. I saw earlier in this session in the comments, everybody talking about places where they learn something materially important. There's Girl Scouts, there's working on the farm. There was, in some instances, people having to be the primary caregiver for their siblings, right? Every single one of those has shaped who they are. And what we noticed as an organization at Big Thought early on was that, art for art's sake didn't tell the full story. It's a beautiful modem, but the creativity that gets built in the art, in the creative spaces, given that Big Thought literally started out only and exclusively as an arts-based organization, we noticed even back then, and that the skills that young people built in theater, in dance, in having to go through a process of creating a work, those are all transferable skills that showed up in other different places and spaces. And because we were leaving that to the ether, because historically the ecosystems have not acknowledged those elements, then we know that we were missing calling out the full value. And if we did not recognize the full value, then you can apply it toward a person's explicit learning journey and make sure that we have quality, rigor, and everything else attached to it. So what we wanted to do was elevate this to a platform to say the out of school time sector, it's what you've known it for, but also here's where it fits in helping build skill sets intentionally, building those skill sets over the long arc of a young person's journey for the future of work, especially in the 21st century, where consistently more and more companies, the entire enterprise and ecosystems are saying the things that we need most are those things that we now call creator skills, durable skills, 21st century skills.
I want you to say more about that, Byron. I've just been so struck recently that powerful experiences often involve human expression, and that is frequently in performing arts, either individually or often collectively. And that's an important part of your creator archetype at Big Picture. And I know Chris and All Stars also value expression and arts as important developmental activities. And that's been a big part of Big Thought.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I think it's more important than ever, right? And it's part of why out of school is so important, because it's the shortcut to developing what I think the new priorities are of agency, identity, motivation, purpose, right?
Well, it's why our foreword was written by the Chief Innovation Officer for the U.S. Department of Labor. A lot of people might not know that, but this is not something that's fluffy to that point. I mean, it is fluffy, but it's fluffy and important. It's like a really fluffy bulldog or something. So the point is, to what you just said, Tom, we have a bit of a responsibility to buck a bit of the trend on STEM only, or when the chips are down, only focus on math and science, because it kind of goes against the emerging evidence that it's less about a distinct technical skill and more about a specific frame of mind and lens of looking at the world that equips you for the world today. I'll end on this last statistic. 2019 and 2020, across every single ecosystem, across every single industry, LinkedIn did a study, and it showed that the number one most desired workforce skill, including accounting, including engineering, was creativity. It was creativity. The industry's been screaming this at us, but I think it's time that we really do pay attention.
Chris, let me let you pile on there, because I didn't know that about All Stars, but in reading the book and your contributions, All Stars really does value creative expression, right?
Absolutely. And I usually just give my proxy to Byron because I love how he represents. But All Stars Project is in a strategic partnership with Big Thought. We're learning a lot from each other. But yes, we were founded in 1981 by educators and psychologists, but also theater artists and performers. And when we talk about culture change, we talk about bringing young people into the mainstream. Tom, you talk about agency. How do we create agency or flexibility or critical thinking? And we have found that performance on stage, so dancing, acting, hip hop, we're about to produce here in Dallas hip hop cabaret, which is going to bring together the traditions of European cabaret and hip hop and take people to places they've never been before. So we're doing on-stage performance, but we're also taking performance off stage. So when young people walk into a Hunt Consolidated or a JP Morgan, there is a performance going on. There is a costume. There is a way of talking. And guess what? You can learn it, but you have to be taught it. It's not natural. And so performance allows you to be unnatural, to get out of your comfort zone. And as we say very specifically to our young people, you can both be who you are, you can be authentic, and you can be who you're not. You can try on a different performance. And whether that's talking about accounting, or whether that's learning about advertising, or at Def Jam Records, learning about the music industry. So again, performance on stage and off is so powerful for our young people.
I want to ask Rambo if this is the case, but I'd mentioned a couple of people every day at ASU GSV that I'm just in love with the learning curve that comes with performing arts. When you get this invitation to a spoken word event and you're going to be on stage in a couple weeks, right? Or in a month, and you go, oh, wow, there's no way that I could possibly do that. And then you watch yourself go up this curve. And then a few weeks later, you're on stage exhibiting a level of mastery, expressing yourself in this powerful way. And maybe you're doing it in a group. Maybe it's a chorus, or maybe it's theater. And so it's this collective expression that's better than you could have hoped for. That experiencing that success curve in public expression is just so powerful. I don't know, Rambo, did you get that sense when you participated in big thought events?
I can wholeheartedly agree and identify with everything that's been shared thus far as well. Within the realm of just speaking on creativity, I feel like Big Thought very much set the stage for me, and I mean, at this point, several generations of youth to learn how to express themselves in a, let's just say, a constructive way. And in the midst of that process, I feel like an identity of each individual was formed. And for me, in my experience, and then of course, like I feel like from performances that have been done at Big Thought, different events, even though I've been doing it for a while, there is a bit of anxiousness and nervousness only for you get to the point of that performance. And that can be seen, what you've spoken, as far as, wow, this is where I was within my mind, but now I'm in the process of doing so. And there is that level of mastery that comes with the practice, whether it's a group, whether it's individual. But what I can personally identify with and agree about what's been shared is how it spreads to all other facets of my life, from any other job that I've had, from working in facility maintenance for 2 years, or being a host or being a server. The biggest thing that comes back is, wow, I really appreciate how well you're able to articulate yourself for your feelings and your emotions, and be authentic to yourself in a respectful and just conducive way. And that's made all the difference, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's a fully manual labor job. I did a landscaping job just the other day, and one's ability to think critically and be creative, like, okay, how are we going to do this awning for this garden? But it's not performative within the sense of standing up on stage, but the way that the mind works. And I definitely feel that my experience in Big Thought set the stage for that it starts there, but it goes to so many other places throughout life and throughout the workforce. Definitely agree. And definitely.
Thank you, Rambo. Yeah, totally. Thanks. Jess Van talked about her consulting work around the power of the arts. Josh makes the connection to presenting in a business meeting. Josh, you take your pod prep so seriously. I know you go up this curve to have those beautiful podcast discussions that you give. Mark, I love the idea of adding performance, right? You're talking about adding value, about this is the mind of a project manager, about finishing and delivering value to your community, to this, whether it's expression or citizenship or commerce. So I love that. Bobby, we love the Education Reimagined work and the really provocative way that you've been thinking about learning ecosystems since your origin. You didn't restrict the idea of learning to school, and you always embrace the community, the ecosystem. Maybe talk about this project and why it was important to Ed Re at this time.
Hey, hi everyone. I want to make that bridge from the performing arts because I love that we veered so deeply into that and say, all of life is a stage, and we actually, all of us want to be engaged and co-creating our lives and our communities together. And we want to create the conditions where kids grow up practicing that all the time together, in a way that gets them deeply connected with their own learning, with their own interests, and finding how to share those meaningfully with the world, and at Education Reimagined, we have been working with schools or districts or communities or partners like Big Thought to say, well, we have learned, and many of us know a lot about that kind of deep connected learning and engagement. We all know how it feels, that's for sure, right? We all have those memories. But what kind of system could we create? What kind of systems do we need that really give access to that for all kids? And that's what we've been working on at Education Reimagined. We have an ecosystem lab where we're working with folks like Big Thought and 11 other sites around the country to learn from them and to say, well, what kind of systems? And the out of school time area has so much wisdom in it because out of school time usually does have a level of following kids' interests. It usually is really connected to families too and what their needs are. And there's that connection at the end of the day and talking with folks. And it's free from a lot of the constraints that schools are under. And so there's a lot.
Might be, but it might be because it's not compulsory. It requires, as Rambo said, it requires enrollment, right? And so the bar is in engagement, that if you want to invite kids into your space to grow and develop, you have to offer engagement.
Exactly. And I guess I just want to say, or just to be really clear, that one thing that we're really working on is at the systems level, what kind of system, an ecosystem, what would that really look if we brought it to life for communities, for them to bring it to life based on their unique circumstances. And there's a lot to learn from that. And so in the Build for More publication, which we were really glad to be included, we said, this is about out of school time, but this is about us. Like, how do we want to raise our children together? What are communities working on? And what can we learn with them?
In addition to Dallas, are there any out of school players in the other ecosystems that you're working with that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah. Wow. You put me on the spot and I can't remember my middle name right now, but hold on a second. Let me think.
Well, I was thinking of our friends at One Stone. It's interesting. It might be the most interesting high school in America, but guess what? It spent 10 years as the world's best after school program. And that's what caused the Albertson Foundation to invite them to create a school. But their roots are solidly in enrolling young people in community changing experiences. So, that's another example.
So yeah, we have Fab Newport in Rhode Island. People should check out. It's just really amazing. Started small and just keeps weaving together and connecting the community, connecting partners. And then the Past Foundation in Ohio is an ecosystem that's beautiful. But I just want to say, in the lab that we're learning from right now also has a micro school or a district with 12,000 kids or, a high school. Ecosystems can grow from many different entry points. And a lot of times it is the out of school time space that's helping us see new possibilities.
Chris, you've been at this for a long time. You've made such an enormous national contribution to this out of school space. What does this project mean to you? And I'm sure it gave you a chance to look back over the last 25 years and just try to express some of your lessons learned. Share a couple of those with us.
Sure. And it was an amazing opportunity. I want to thank Byron Sanders for putting the project together, and my co-author, Gabrielle Kurlander, who was the founding CEO of All Stars and is a theater performer and director and is directing the show. But it was a wonderful moment to just look back over base building work in outside of school. And so 25 years ago, there was not a lot of airtime for it. It continues to this day that we probably spend 95% of our time talking about education, but kids spend 75% of their time outside of school. And so we need to balance that. And I think from a financial perspective, we've been privately funded. So we have not been government funded. We didn't want the constraints. Initially, our founders, Dr. Lenore Fulani and Dr. Fred Newman, were innovators in the alternative education movements and psychology movements, and basically said, what do our young people need to grow? We started with a talent show, literally a free program that young people came to, Enrollment, to go to Rambo's beautiful words and his performance. Every kid made it. This was not talent. This was a community coming together. And then we began to ask the young people, and we had amazing innovators. Pamela Lewis helped to create that talent show model 30 years ago in New York City with the rise of hip hop. And then we asked young people, well, now what? And they said, we want jobs. We want exposure to, as they put it now in Dallas, millionaires and billionaires. We want to meet people different than us. I was meeting with a foundation leader yesterday, and he was saying, hey, my dad only had an 8th grade education. There's things he couldn't teach me. So what we began to construct was an ecosystem where youth and adults came together to do conjoint activity where they both developed. So I think a lot of the challenge, and I think the work that Bobby and her team are doing is amazing. And it is a little bit like trying to turn an ocean liner, you know, Tom, and you've been at it a long time, the education system. How do we retool this nationwide system? Outside of school time started with a completely different mandate. And so as we moved into partnership with the corporate community, that opened up that these business people, multiracial, many of them white though, many of them conservatives, wanted to invest directly in our young people. And guess what? We were at a press conference with the mayor of Dallas last week where we relaunched the Summer Youth Employment Program with Mayor Johnson and Hunter Hunt, who's the chairman and CEO of Hunt Consolidated Energy. He said, this will change you. This isn't just about changing young people's lives. So I think the issue that we're trying to tap into nationwide, and we are in New York and Newark and Chicago and Dallas and the Bay Area, is how do we build those communities outside of school to do one very important thing, which I'll throw in here, in addition to your deeper learning, Tom, is development. There is this human process, how children learn language, et cetera, that is different than learning. They are interconnected and both are critical. We are not investing enough in developmental experiences outside of school. And that's really what ours and now Big Thought and others are kind of pulling together. We've got to break down those silos. We continue to compete too much with each other. And so I'm trying to pound that drum in every way I can. And Byron's been an amazing thought partner in that.
Yeah, and I just want to double down on Chris's point, and it connects back to something that Bobby was saying about earlier. You know, too often, like we said, people have thought about out of school time as the icing on the cake when it's really actually part of the cake itself. As you can tell, I speak in metaphors. So what I think is important, and one of the, I think, highest aspirations out of this book is that we can get policy aligned with being able to formally recognize this space. These should be credit-bearing experiences, things that a person is able to do outside of the classroom in play with a purpose, right? In discovery, but discovery with a purpose. And it is entirely possible to map these experiences to even core content in curriculum. It is entirely possible to ensure that if you are building as your school system a portrait of a learner, we're able to build these experiences and map them back into these with a structured framework with an adult as advisor, an adult as facilitator. That can be school. And we're saying it is out of school time, but I think, to borrow from the words of my esteemed colleague, Greg McPherson, you know, the most beautiful idea is if we can unblur, well, it's actually if we could just eviscerate the line between what we are saying with formal school and then informal school, because the entire circle of it matters deeply to a young person's learning journey.
Thank you, Byron. As warned, I want to talk about entrepreneurship. Charles Fidel, in his book last year, Education for the Age of AI, said a couple times, entrepreneurship is the job of the future. And by that, I think he's referring to finding a problem worth solving, toward opportunity recognition, designing solutions, and delivering value to a community. So we're not just talking about commerce here. It could be social enterprise, but it's finding work worth doing, designing a solution, and then experiencing value creation for your community. I think this is a super important set of experiences that every kid deserves every year or two, at least while they're in high school. It's really hard for high schools to host. It doesn't fit anywhere in the master schedule. As educators, we don't know much about this. We're used to giving small problems with right answers, and entrepreneurship is big problems without known answers. I love the way Built for More highlights some entrepreneurial experiences that happen out of school. Byron, this has been important. It's a big thought. You even created this creator archetype around this act of expression and value construction for your community. But today, a little more about entrepreneurship and out of school.
Yeah, there was a really interesting sidebar that we had up here a little further in the thread. Go find it when you get a chance. Might have been between me and Mark or so, but yeah, it says creativity of expression is not always the same as making creative things happen. I think the skills of getting things done is the most important, which is really
Mark.
Mark, I appreciate you elevating that, because just to put a pin on the point that Tom was raising, I was making a presentation to a group of, I believe it was YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization. Basically, it's a group of these really successful entrepreneurs. I think your net worth has to be like, 13 million and above or something like that. So you're doing pretty good. And I asked everybody in the room, who in here thinks they're creative? And two guys, I think maybe three people raised their hand. And I was like, okay, why? And then one guy was like, I'm in a band. Then there's another guy who's like, I'm a photographer. Then there's another person who says, and then I paused and I said, all right, so let me get this right. I'm talking to a room of about 50 or so people who literally created a company that solved a specific problem in a material way that the market had not yet seen, and none of y'all think you're creative. Three people thought they were creative. So the reason why this explicit entrepreneurial gotta call it out thing is really important is because the people who we have many entrepreneurs in waiting who have not self-identified as having the capacity to be an entrepreneur, because we haven't framed the skill sets that are the base elements of entrepreneurship so that people can then be able to say, oh, wow, that applies to me. That's one of the reasons why this creator archetype is so critically important, and other frameworks like it, because people need to understand that you weren't born a police officer or a teacher or whatever it is I'm doing in my life right now, right? Like you weren't born those things, but you are and can build a base set of skills that absolutely can be applied toward these. And I'll double down on why the entrepreneurship part is so important, because in the world, in the economy, as we're talking about, it used to be that people would go and work maybe 2, maybe 3 jobs and then retire, right? The average number of jobs for a millennial and a Gen Z is about 16 before the end of their working years, 16. And the other thing that is materially important is as the world changes so rapidly around us, even including policy changes. So let's talk about, even with it, let's put your politics aside. Let's say if tariffs are driving production and producing back to the United States in some way, form, or fashion, then guess what? All of the jobs that we've been looking at over the last 30, 40, 50 years, there's going to be some new jobs that we're going to have to be prepared for, new solutions that people are going to have to go out and create. And if we don't have an entire workforce built with the capacity of creating and then bringing things from inception to completion and building those skills in non-traditional learning spaces of learning by doing, then it's not just a matter of individuals not being able to earn. We're not going to have a successful society in the United States of America. It's critically important.
And Byron, I'll just pile on by saying, you talked about the number of careers accelerating. It's also going to be stepping into employment and entrepreneurship and employment and going back and forth from being an employer to being an employee, and sometimes at the same time, because young people are going to have a portfolio career where they're contributing in different ways at different times. Chris, can you describe how and where entrepreneurship, or at least problem finding and problem solving, show up in All Stars?
Sure. And in our model, we don't necessarily call it entrepreneurship, but we do teach people how to build things and how to create things. So at the talent shows I mentioned, the kids are on stage, but they're also selling tickets and they're stage managing. They're learning lighting and design from volunteers. So they own the whole process. In the development school for youth, which is our introduction to the corporate community, young people volunteer every week. They're calling their peers. They're recruiting the next class of young people. So I think it's imbuing, let's go agency, let's go purpose and belonging but it has to be activity centric. We did, I think, some important work along the lines of the creator archetype with Southern Methodist University Center on Research and Evaluation. And we created an outline of what we call 8 dimensions of development. So we wanted to be able to measure non-academic outcomes, which we take to be critical for outside of school time. And you'll recognize some of these dimensions that are open worldview, improvisation, confidence, interpersonal competence, vocational competence, sort of looking at these different pieces of what are now being called durable skills. Byron talked about them. They're not just the icing, they're the cake. And so we've been able to rigorously apply these frameworks. And again, with Big Thought using their creator archetype to show progress, that basically you can see young people gain in confidence, in communication capability, in ensemble building. And when we talk about, you all talked a lot about AI. We started our chapter with a slightly provocative title, which is non-artificial intelligence, because there's all this other stuff that our young people need. Like they need to learn how to go up into an elevator into an office building. They need to learn how to navigate public transport to get to a job on time. And so again, we have to do both. That's not an anti-AI thing, but saying, let's not skip over these developmental processes. And in fact, we can imbue all outside of school time programs with these features. They'll look different. So again, we're not looking to, make monolithic the industry, but we are uplifting it. And some of it is credentialing that Byron was speaking to, but some of it is also just recognizing that young people, like when I was in high school, my dad worked at IBM, and he's like, hey, make a proposal to a manager about comparing the PC and the Mac. And I did. I was probably 14 years old. And this guy met with me, this manager at IBM, and he took my proposal seriously. I don't think anything happened off of it, but I had this whole experience of confidence building and agency and voice. And so again, I would just underscore, we have this unique opportunity with outside of school time as a companion piece to ed reform, where young people can grow and transform. And I will underline, learn how to learn. So we talk a lot about, we're just going to teach them the next thing. Well, we're just going to, teach them how to use AI. No, we're going to teach them how, Byron said those 16 things. So our focus is, we're going to teach you how to learn, not just the skill. Because if you learn how to learn, you are going to be fine.
It's, I guess Charles Fidel calls it the meta learning. It's being meta about watching yourself go up that learning curve and understanding how you do that so that learning sprints become repeatable. Diane Laufenberg talks about some farm learning. And big shout out to FFA, which is a great supporter of after school entrepreneurship, often in rural communities. Diane, a couple times you've referred to rich learning experiences. You want to say more about that and why out of school is such an important place for fostering rich and powerful experiences?
I grew up in this world of farming that I hated, by the way. Like I was the D- farmer. No one would pick me for their farm team. And so, but reflecting on it as a teacher and as somebody who, sees themselves as a perpetual learner, my capacity to be a functional adult is completely based in those experiences I had outside of school. I mean, I had a conversation with my mom one day and she's like, you kids did what you were told. And I went, difference, Mom. We accomplished the goal you set us out to accomplish. Like there was no coming back in the house without X thing done. You didn't tell us how to get part 1, then part 2, then you said, go get this thing done. And then my 10 and 11-year-old, my sister and I are out there figuring it out because that was the job. And it was when you look back at just over time, kids have less and less uncontrolled time. They have more and more controlled time. Adults are more in charge of how kids spend their time. And I've just spent a lot of time reflecting on, we got to give kids real things to do with real stakes, with real outcomes, with some real juice in the game to produce something real and not something, conjured or, generated out of the teacher mind, but just something as close or as real as possible that feels like they're not just going to live in some world someday, but they're in the world today doing real and possible things with outcomes and stakes. And so that's how I grew up. I hated it, but it was so good for me. And, it was just developmentally such an important piece of how I move in the world today, and tried to bring as much of that into the education world. I mean, I took kids on river trips. I'm back out in Arizona right now from Philadelphia, bring crews of kids out to Arizona just to shake up their understanding of the world and what's possible and how they can move in it, in all of these ways that we can help enrich that time for kids and not just sit them down in a chair and tell them to read and do math better. And so, so I think about that a lot.
Thank you, Diane. Amy Anderson, you have this interesting initiative called Reschool Colorado, where you're trying to help families stitch together pathways, and you, I think, uniquely blend what we think of as school and out of school into personalized pathways. I'm just curious how you are reacting to this dialogue.
I'm loving this dialogue. This is my kind of dialogue. I'm so happy to be here and listening to all of you today. Much like I'm hearing from each of you, like all of the experiences I had outside of school really shaped who I became as a person too. And, we work with families most directly. And the whole focus on out of school time came from shadowing families back in the early days of Reschool, where we saw a kid go through their day and understood that they were, 75, 80% of their day outside of school with their family and their community, doing a variety of different things, and only 20% of their day or so in school. And that world that sat outside of school was just not as equally accessible for the kids that we were working with. And so this idea that Bobby talks about around systems, like the learning part of it's crucial. And that's, I think, what a lot of this conversation has focused on is, kids need access to these rich learning experiences that build upon their cultural identities, that expose them to new opportunities and passions and interests. But we also need to have a system that supports that. And that means that we need to finance it. And we need to ensure that there's support for families if they need access to information or navigational supports and those kind of things. And so a lot of the work we do is obviously we give families money, we give learning dollars that we've raised philanthropically to parents and kids that they can direct towards learning experiences of their choosing. And we've tried hard to get systems at a state and local level to pass public policies that would mirror and mimic these learning dollars that we've done philanthropically. And so a lot of our time is spent not just on the learning, which is important, but also how do we stand this up in a way that ensures equity and access?
Hey, Virgil is here from Aurora Institute, and you're really the leading advocate for competency systems. Can updated outcome frameworks and competency systems stitch together in and out of school in a more productive way?
Hey, Tom. Hey, team. Thanks for this inspiring conversation. For sure. Like the competencies come to life as a result of these out of school learning experiences, right? Like there's so much richness and robustness that exists in our communities. This is why we refer to the transition of school systems to learning communities. It's because of these enriching great opportunities that extend beyond school walls, right? It's an opportunity for young people to make meaning and sense of what they are learning in school and how it's relevant to their context, right? And what's around them. So that's my long-winded answer of saying yes, Tom, absolutely.
I love that. And Bobby, a chance for closing thoughts on ecosystems that embrace and include out of school time.
Yeah, thank you. I think, when we think about everything that's been said here, kind of at the heart of it is the learner, like having a unique learning journey, actually being able to pursue some interest, to work in local places, to try internships, to expand their learning out into the community, but to be seen as unique. And it's hard to have a system that can hold all of that uniqueness. And so I think the places that we're talking to here and the people that are doing this pioneering work are helping us see what kind of system it needs to be. And one of the things that we find in our work at Education Reimagined is that it is a real commitment to co-creation. You know, you see a lot of people creating like a portrait of a learner or some way to put people around the table and say, what's our shared vision? So there's that process of shared vision, but it's the same that you want for the kids. Each kid is seen as unique, each community is unique, and they have a story to tell. And so it's amazing to see how these systems are emerging and people are finding those insights and sharing them, and credentialing learning and recognizing that the creative and developmental learning is so important. How do we capture that? That's part of that, again, co-creation of the kind of.
Just a word of thanks for Education Reimagined's advocacy for ecosystems, particularly out of school systems. And it's been provocative and tough. It took real courage to advocate that out of school learning should be valued. It should be funded. The folks inside the system aren't always friendly to that idea. And so we really appreciate your brave and bold leadership. Thanks to you, and thanks to Emily Leaptag, who's on today. Chris, closing thoughts on out of school lessons learned, maybe a word of advice for folks that are joining.
Yes. So trying to say something slightly provocative, which is, I do not believe that you can do workforce development in the classroom. So there is a huge amount of money being given out right now, and everyone's trying to get it for what they do. And what we're finding is, unless we bring young people out of the classroom, off the campus, into direct experiences in the corporate community with caring partners, they will not actually be able to grow and develop in the ways that we want them to. So we're saying that as a friend of schools, not as against schools. The second piece is the corporate and business community are not doing enough yet. And so we are working with a group of CEOs around the country to create a clearer and crisper message that the corporate community needs to provide more opportunities for our young people, need to be seen as partners in their growth and development, and move beyond their short-term thinking to sort of long-term investment in our total workforce ecosystem. And then lastly is, let's stop competing. Let's stop fighting over dollars. Let's figure out how to use our collective strengths. So Big Thought and All Stars are doing a set of initiatives, including working with Cristo Rey schools and documenting new kinds of models to strengthen their workforce development. And so there's a lot of good collaboration happening around the country. We need to uplift it more as nonprofit leaders and educators.
And Byron, you're running for school board in Dallas because you're trying to make the case for communities of learning. You lost your audio.
That's good.
Yeah.
Oh, wait 1 second. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I am running for school board. I passed the baton to an amazing leader of Big Thought a few months back. Her name is Erin Offord. We had a 2-year succession strategy. She was chief of staff there, and she and Greg and the whole team are continuing this amazing work. And yes, one of the main reasons why I'm running for school board now is to create the kind of policy environment that allows us to not just, the idea is not just fund after school, sure, but more importantly, bring the things that we were working on so hard into being formally recognized and embraced in a policy landscape. It's not just about dollars. It's about everything that Bobby said. It's about being able to recognize micro-credentials, bringing in those same elements, maybe the portrait of a learner, and making that part of what we have here, which is a teacher evaluation system. Because if you don't measure it, if you don't make it central to our, the way we're holding ourselves as a school district accountable, then it's all the stuff that's going to disappear whenever the, chips are down and whenever, things get tough or resources get tight. We have to make this part of the cake, like we said, and that's why I'm running for school board. And quite frankly, to your point that you brought up earlier, Tom, we're talking about the future of work, but if we're really taking a bigger step back, these skills are just important for life. If you don't have the capacity to build relationships with human beings, then no, you're not going to be able to lead this project at work. You're not going to be able to work with clients and customers, but you're also not going to be able to be a good father. You're not going to be able to be a good member at your mosque. You're not going to be able to be the kind of contributor to society that you need. It's all interconnected. And if we want a better society where everything isn't burning all around us, then I think it's probably time that we start to infuse this into our systems.
It's time. Byron, Bobby, Chris, and Rambo, thank you for making the day better. Thanks for this book. Built for more, the role of out-of-school time in preparing youth for a future of work. Mason, take us out.
Yeah, echo Tom. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you everyone for presenting with us. We have a couple of town hall announcements that'll be out soon. We got a couple in May, I think, actually. So stay on the lookout and more from us. But keep up all the amazing work. More information next week, and reach out to mason@gettingsmart.com if you have any questions or want to share a story on the site. Thanks all. Really appreciate you.
Shout out, Joe.
Have a happy weekend.
Getting smart. Awesome. Bobby, great to meet you. Byron, take care. Rambo, well done, sir.
Thanks
Good
again.
pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
You bet. Thanks for tuning in to the Getting Smart podcast today. We want this podcast to be actionable, insightful, and a great way to learn about what's next in learning. In order to stay on the cutting edge, we need people in the field to tell us what they're hearing, what they're wanting, and what they're needing to learn more about. Got a topic or a guest in mind? Send your recommendations to me, Mason@gettingsmart.com. And if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or subscribe wherever you listen. Feel free to share the podcast on social media using the hashtag GSPodcasts. Thanks so much.